She hijacked my summer cabin, turned it into a fake Airbnb, and threw a 30-person rager like she owned the place. But I'm no victim, and I didn't come alone. When I cut the power and stormed in with 2 ex-Marines and a folder full of proof, the real party started. I'd always loved that cabin. It wasn't big or fancy, but it was mine, tucked right by the lake, surrounded by tall pines that made the place feel a world away from the rest of Michigan. I'd spent years fixing it up after leaving the Marines, turning it into a quiet retreat where I could breathe again. The kind of place you escape to when life gets too loud. So when the first odd email popped up in my inbox, I barely gave it a glance. Thank you for letting us stay. The lake view was incredible. 5 stars. I figured it was spam and deleted it, but then came another and another, each one mentioning my Airbnb listing and wonderful host Matt. Only problem was, I'd never rented my cabin to anyone, much less listed it online. At first I thought maybe someone was pranking me. My friends know I've got a short fuse when it comes to trespassers, ever since a neighbor's kid tried to borrow my kayak without asking. But this was different. The messages kept coming for 2 days straight, and one even included a selfie. A family smiling on my deck, their kids splashing in my dockside chairs. My stomach turned cold. I checked my security cameras, the ones I'd installed after a raccoon invasion the previous year. The live feed loaded and I nearly dropped my phone. There were cars, a whole line of them, parked along my private road. People were unloading coolers, dragging speakers across the porch, laughing like they'd just arrived at a resort. I called my neighbor Joe, who lived down the road and had an unobstructed view of my property. "Matt," he said, his voice half laughing, half nervous, "you throwing a party I wasn't invited to? Looks like 20 people over there." I told him I hadn't set foot near the cabin in weeks. There was a pause, then Joe said quietly, "You better come see this. Looks like they're setting up a sound system." I could already feel the headache forming behind my eyes. Before heading out, I sat down at my computer and searched Airbnb for anything resembling my address. It didn't take long. There it was. Lakeview Retreat, Michigan's hidden gem. Photos of my living room, my porch, my damn canoe, all slightly filtered to look more romantic. The profile description claimed it was hosted by Karen Weston, a name I recognized from somewhere. Then it hit me. Karen was the self-appointed president of the HOA in the neighboring development, the one I had refused to join years ago because I didn't want to be told what color to paint my door. She'd always had a smug smile and a habit of talking like she was running the entire county. I scrolled through the listing. She was renting my property for hundreds of dollars a night. There were even fake reviews. Karen was such a professional host. The cabin was immaculate, I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. It wasn't just trespassing, it was identity theft wrapped in real estate fraud. I grabbed my truck keys, threw my bag in the passenger seat, and started the 2-hour drive up to the lake. The whole way there, my mind was on repeat. The guests, the fake listing, that smug grin of hers when she last tried to convince me to bring my property under HOA oversight. I remembered her saying, "It's better for everyone if we keep things uniform." Right. Uniform, as in under her thumb. By the time I reached the dirt road leading to the cabin, the sun was setting. I could already hear the bass thumping through the trees. It wasn't just a few people, it sounded like a full-blown event. Colored lights flashed through the windows. I parked a little way off, not wanting to alert anyone yet. Through the pines, I could see silhouettes dancing inside, someone waving a bottle out on the deck, and a big white banner hanging above the door. "Welcome to Lakeview Retreat." For a minute, I just stood there in disbelief. My peaceful getaway had been turned into a goddamn frat house. I could feel the anger rising. Not the loud, explosive kind, but that cold, controlled sort that sits behind your ribs and waits. I took a few photos, zoomed in on the banner and the cars with license plates visible. Evidence. Then I turned off my phone flashlight and started walking back toward the truck. I knew I couldn't just storm in. Not yet. I needed to figure out what I was walking into. Halfway down the path, I noticed something else. A sign stuck into the ground near my gate. Property managed by Lakeview Events. For questions, contact Karen Weston. It even had a fake phone number. She'd gone full professional scammer. As I sat in the truck, hands gripping the steering wheel, I thought about calling the sheriff's office right then. But I also knew how small-town politics worked. Karen had connections. She'd probably smile, wave some paperwork, and convince them it was all a misunderstanding. I needed proof. Solid proof. I opened the Airbnb app again, found the fake page, and reported it. Then I took screenshots of everything. The listing, the reviews, even the price per night. There was a new booking listed for tomorrow, meaning she wasn't done. This wasn't a mistake or confusion. It was an ongoing operation. That was the moment I realized this wasn't going to be a quick confrontation. Karen had crossed a line most people don't even see. She'd turned my home into her personal side hustle, and judging by the scale of it, this wasn't her first time pulling a stunt like this. I wasn't just going to shut her down. I was going to make sure she couldn't pull something like this on anyone again. But first, I needed to see what exactly was happening inside that cabin, and who, if anyone, was helping her do it. I turned the key in the ignition, headlights off, and drove quietly down the road toward Joe's house. He'd have binoculars, coffee, and the kind of patience that comes from years of watching deer cross the same road every evening. Together, we'd figure out what the hell was going on. By the time I reached Joe's porch, the night had turned cold. That quiet kind of cold where sound carries farther than it should. Joe was already waiting with a thermos and a pair of binoculars, like he'd been expecting trouble. "They've got lights strung up all over," he said, handing me the binoculars. Through the lenses, I could see my cabin glowing like a carnival, shadows moving across the windows. Cars lined the dirt road in both directions, some parked half on the grass. A generator hummed somewhere near the shed. They'd even bypassed the house power. I clenched my jaw. "They're really doing it," I muttered. "A full-blown rental business." I decided to walk in. Joe tried to stop me, said I should wait until morning, call the sheriff again. But patience has never been my strongest suit, and seeing strangers clinking glasses on my deck was enough to flip a switch in me. I parked near the edge of the road, got out, and walked up the driveway like I belonged there. The first person to spot me was a man built like a refrigerator. Tall, broad, wearing a black windbreaker with security printed on the chest. He had a radio clipped to his shoulder and an expression that said he enjoyed telling people no. "Evening," he said, stepping in front of me. "Private event. You lost?" "Yeah," I said. "I'm lost, all right. Lost my own damn house." The man didn't even flinch. "Sir, guests only. You'll need to leave." I could smell the cheap cologne and cigarette smoke coming off his jacket. "I'm not leaving," I said, keeping my voice even. "This is my property." Before he could answer, a familiar voice cut through the music. "Matthew, you made it!" And there she was, Karen Weston herself, standing on my porch in a sparkling dress, holding a wine glass like it was a prop. Her hair was perfectly coiffed, her smile stretched too wide. "I was wondering when you'd drop by," she said, coming down the steps with the practiced grace of someone used to being in charge. "Karen," I said, "you mind explaining why there's 100 people partying in my cabin?" "Oh, don't be dramatic," she said, waving her glass dismissively. "We're hosting a community retreat. I thought you'd be flattered we chose your property. It was listed online, you know." People booked it fair and square. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Listed by who? She blinked innocently. By me, of course. You weren't using it, and people kept asking about lake access. I simply facilitated. Facilitated? I said. You stole my photos, created a fake listing, and charged strangers to party in my house. She sighed, that condescending sigh she always used at HOA meetings when someone dared question her. Let's not get hung up on details. You should have joined the association when you had the chance. We could have avoided all this confusion. Behind her, the so-called security guard was listening. He didn't look surprised, more like tired. I caught him watching her, something unreadable in his face. She noticed it too and snapped, Greg, make sure our guest doesn't interfere. I'll handle this. Greg. The name clicked. I'd heard it before. He used to be around when Karen's husband still lived with her, before the messy divorce. I remembered rumors about late-night visits and her personal trainer who drove a black SUV. Karen turned back to me, that smug smile returning. Look, Matt, I know you're upset, but everything's under control. The police have been informed. The event's fully insured. Everyone's happy. Everyone but the owner, I said. She laughed lightly, but her eyes flicked toward Greg, who was standing a few feet behind me now, arms crossed. Let's be civil, she said. We don't need to escalate. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. You're trespassing, Karen. You and every single one of your guests. I'm calling the sheriff. Already did, she said sweetly. They'll be here any minute, and when they arrive, I'll just show them the rental agreement. I froze. What rental agreement? She smiled wider. The one with your signature. For a second I didn't understand, and then it hit me. She'd forged it. Of course she had. That woman could fake anything if it meant getting her way. You're unbelievable, I said. You've gone too far this time. Oh, stop being so melodramatic, it's just business. Headlights flared down the road. A county sheriff's cruiser pulled up, gravel crunching under the tires. 2 officers stepped out. Karen waved them over like she'd called for room service. Officers, over here! I explained everything. That I was the owner. That the listing was fake. That I had documents in my truck to prove it. The younger cop looked unsure, glancing between us. The older one flipped through Karen's papers, which she had ready in a neat folder. According to this, he said slowly, there's a short-term rental agreement for the weekend, signed by one Matthew Carter. I could have laughed if it didn't make me so angry. That's not my signature, it's a photocopy. Karen shrugged, that perfect performance of innocence. Maybe he forgot. These veterans sometimes get confused. That line hit harder than she probably expected. The older cop stiffened a little, but he didn't call her out. Instead, he said, Look, this seems like a civil matter. I suggest you folks work it out in the morning. Then to me, if you believe fraud was committed, you can file a report at the station. And just like that, they were gone. Karen's smirk returned instantly. See, everything's fine. No need to ruin the mood. You're welcome to stay if you like. Have a drink, mingle a bit. Might do you some good. I turned and walked away before I said something I couldn't take back. Greg's voice followed me softly. She's digging her own grave, man. I looked back, but he was already turning away, pretending to check his radio. When I got to the truck, I sat in the dark for a long minute, watching the party lights blink against the trees. I could feel that same cold anger settling deeper now, quieter, sharper. She'd played her hand, and for the moment she'd won. But the night wasn't over, and neither was I. I barely slept that night. I parked the truck a few lots down the road and sat there in the dark, letting the engine cool while my thoughts burned hotter by the minute. Every few minutes, laughter would echo from the direction of my cabin. My goddamn cabin, where Karen's guests were still partying like they'd booked a resort. My fists clenched each time I thought about that smug look on her face, about how casually she waved my property off as a community retreat. But more than the arrogance, it was the nerve, the planning. This wasn't some impulsive grab, this was a full-on operation. By 4 in the morning, the lights finally dimmed. I slipped out of the truck, checked the cabin's perimeter from a safe distance, then made my way back to Joe's before sunrise. He was already up pouring coffee, looking like he hadn't slept either. "You look like someone who needs to break something," he said. "Or fix something. Want to start with electricity?" That was the plan. I knew the system well. I'd rewired most of it myself after the old fuse box started humming like a beehive. There was a master cutoff outside, hidden behind a false utility box near the back of the shed. Unless you knew it was there, you'd never spot it. Joe and I took a long walk around the edge of the woods, avoiding the road, and slipped into the tree line behind the cabin. Sunlight was just beginning to creep through the trees, but the place was dead quiet now. Bottles everywhere, plastic cups on the porch, half a pizza box sliding off a deck chair. I knelt down by the shed, flipped open the false panel, and killed the power. A satisfying click. The generator Karen brought in was only tied into external lights and the speakers, but the internal system, water heater, fridge, wall outlets, all ran off the main. No more coffee for them in the morning, no hot water, no phone chargers, no clue what was about to come next. I returned to my truck and waited. By 10, the first complaints started showing up online. One guest left a comment on the fake Airbnb listing. "No power, rude neighbors, will not return." Another said, "The place seemed sketchy and I think someone was watching us from the woods." I grinned. By early afternoon, I got the message I'd been waiting for. Greg. I didn't recognize the number, but I recognized the way he started the text. "This doesn't leave your phone." He wanted to meet, not at the cabin, but at an old rest stop 5 miles down the highway. Said it was about Karen. Said he had something I'd want to hear. I showed up early and waited, watching cars fly by in both directions. Greg pulled in 15 minutes late, driving a dusty Ford Explorer. He looked rough, bags under his eyes, jaw clenched like he hadn't decided whether to talk or punch something. He got out, leaned against the hood, and lit a cigarette without saying a word. "She's gone too far," he said finally. "I didn't sign up for this." "You didn't sign up to block me from my own house?" I shot back. "Could have fooled me." He exhaled, looked off down the road. "I was protecting her. Thought I owed her that. Now, I think I'm the one that needs protecting." I said nothing, just waited. He took a long drag, then pulled a small flash drive from his coat pocket. "This has everything. Emails, screenshots, voice recordings. She forged 3 separate signatures for that fake lease. Yours was just one." My mouth went dry. "You've been sitting on this?" "I was gonna delete it, but then last night she told one of the guests that if anything went wrong, she'd say, 'I forged the docs,' that I acted on my own. I don't do fall guy, man." I took the drive. "Why give this to me?" He looked at me then, really looked. "Because I've seen her do this to other people. Not like this big, not a house grab, but little things. Power trips, and you're the first person who's pushing back." I nodded slowly. "You realize you just implicated yourself." He gave a bitter smile. "I already was. Might as well pick a side before this blows up." We talked another 10 minutes. I kept my questions short. He gave names, dates, details, including the fact that Karen had been running fake listings for months, some in other counties, always using other people's properties and rotating the host names. She even had 2 burner phones and a fake LLC, Lakeview Events. Greg didn't ask for immunity or money or protection, he just wanted out. Said he was done being her backup plan. Before he left, he handed me one more gem. A recording from a week ago. Karen telling someone on the phone, "It's not stealing if they don't use it. These vets leave things sitting for years. I'm just putting it to better use." I drove straight to my lawyer. Marcy Jennings was a quiet pit bull in a navy blazer, ex-military herself, which is part of why I trusted her. I laid everything out, the drive, the screenshots, the photos, the fake listing, the recording. She didn't blink once, just started printing things and talking to herself in legalese. By the time I left her office, we had a fraud complaint ready, a cease and desist order, and paperwork for a restraining order against Karen. And that was just step one. The next morning, we served her. I wasn't there for it, but Joe said she came out in a silk robe, wine glass still in hand, and tried to talk the courier into rescheduling the delivery. It didn't work. Later that day, the power was still out. I watched from the trees as guests began packing up angrily, dragging bags and garbage to their cars. One guy tried to open the water pump closet and nearly electrocuted himself. A few shouted into phones. One woman, I kid you not, cried because she paid for lakefront luxury. I took video of it all. Karen didn't show her face that whole afternoon. But I knew she wasn't done. Not yet. The kind of person who builds an empire on fake signatures and rented smiles doesn't fold after one legal notice. She was going to retaliate. I just didn't know how soon. The plan was simple, not elegant. Nothing in my life ever is, but direct. Cut the lights, make a scene, force the truth into daylight, or what was left of it by the time I pulled up with my crew. It was Saturday night, the final event of Karen's Lakeview retreat weekend, a catered dinner supposedly. Live DJ, fairy lights in the trees, guests arriving dressed like they were attending a lakeside wedding. Meanwhile, my damn roof still had raccoon damage she never noticed. But this time, I wasn't coming alone. I'd made a few calls the day before, the kind of calls you only make when you're ready to raise the stakes. Nate and Ramon were old friends, former infantry brothers, both built like they could bench press a Buick and still have breath left to recite the Constitution. Nate worked in private security these days. Ramon trained tactical dogs for law enforcement. They didn't ask questions, just said when and what's the dress code. I told them, civilian gear, headlamps, no weapons drawn, but let's not exactly whisper either. We met just before sunset. I handed out GoPros already recording and printed documents. The property deed, photos of the fake listing, and the audio file of Karen calling me a confused vet. I had backup copies in my glove box and on a password-protected cloud folder. I wasn't just planning a confrontation, I was preparing for litigation, YouTube, and possibly Netflix. We waited until the party was in full swing. By the time the music hit that sickeningly upbeat BPM and I heard someone yell, "Tequila shots." From the porch, I gave Joe the go-ahead. He was waiting near the shed where I'd taught him the location of the hidden breaker. One click, and the cabin dropped into instant blackout. No warning, just silence and screaming. A shriek broke the air like someone had been shot. Then came the confusion. Stumbling bodies, phones flashing, someone yelling, "What the hell?" And another person laughing, thinking it was part of the show. It wasn't. We walked in from the side trail, headlamps slicing through the dark like searchlights. Nate in front, me behind, Ramon flanking right. No shouting, no guns, just three very large men in black jackets and boots walking directly into a party that had just hit DEFCON 0. I held a folder in my left hand and the flashlight in my right. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. "This event is over," I said. "You're trespassing on private property. My name is Matthew Carter. I own this home." Gasps, nervous murmurs. Someone dropped a solo cup. One of the guests, clearly drunk, tried to swagger toward me. "Dude, we paid like $400 each to be here. Go yell at the host." "I am the host," I said, "and I never charged a damn cent." From the house, I heard Karen's voice slicing through the dark like a rusty blade. "What the hell is this?" Then she appeared, barefoot, dress askew, phone flashlight in one hand and a glass of red wine in the other. "Matt, what is this stunt?" I turned to face her. "This is me reclaiming my house. Power's off, generator's dead, and your scam is finished." She laughed unconvincingly. "Oh, don't be dramatic. You're ruining everything." I stepped closer. "You forged my name. You created a fake Airbnb account. You sold access to my property to dozens of strangers and tried to pass it off as a retreat. That's fraud. You can't prove that," she snapped. Nate, bless him, flipped his GoPro forward. "Say cheese, Karen, this is all going on record." The guests were already leaving. Some were backing out of the driveway in panic, headlights swerving. One guy tripped over the fire pit and nearly face-planted into a bush. Another screamed at Karen, "You told us this was legit!" Karen wasn't done. She pulled out her phone and started dialing. "I'm calling the sheriff," she hissed. "You and your little militia, and this is intimidation. You're all getting arrested." "Great," I said, waving her on. "Let's all talk to the sheriff. In fact, I invited him too." That wasn't a bluff. Earlier, I'd left a message with Deputy Collins, the one officer in the county who actually respected me. He'd texted back, "On duty at 8. Keep it calm, I'll swing by." It was now 8:15. Right on cue, headlights approached from the main road. A cruiser pulled up. Karen rushed toward it like she was running for salvation. "Officer," she cried, "they're armed. They stormed the property. They cut the power." Collins stepped out, calm as ever. "Evening, folks." He looked at me, then at Karen. "Mr. Carter, you all right?" I nodded. "More or less. I've got documentation and witness statements, also footage." Karen started shrieking. Something about how we were impersonating officials, endangering lives, domestic terrorism. Collins let her rant for about 20 seconds before raising a hand. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to calm down. Now, whose name is on the property title?" "His," she spat, "but..." He turned to me. "Do you have ID?" I handed it over. He checked. "And the guests?" "Don't know them," I said. "They booked through a fake listing created by her." Collins turned to Karen. "Do you have a business license for this event?" Her mouth opened, closed. "It's not a business, it's a community function." "Then why are guests telling me they paid several $100s each?" She floundered. Collins turned to the guests, the ones who hadn't fled yet. "Anyone have proof of payment?" Phones went up. Emails, payment apps, screenshots, Venmo transactions with captions like "Lakeview Weekend Deposit." And that was the tipping point. Collins radioed for backup. Another unit arrived. Statements were taken. Karen was separated from the rest and questioned. Greg showed up midway through, still in his black jacket. But this time, he stood behind the sheriff's car, arms crossed, watching her fall apart. And when the K9 unit showed up, sniffing around the property at Collins' request, and found something that looked suspiciously like recreational drugs in a cooler near the deck. Several guests got handcuffed on the spot. Karen tried one last Hail Mary. "I'm the victim here," she screamed. "They broke in. They threatened me." Collins walked up to her slowly. "Ma'am, I have 3 recordings of you stating this was a business you ran. I have forged documents, and I have more than 20 witnesses who all say you charged them illegally for access to someone else's property." She stared at him, frozen. He clicked the cuffs. "You have the right to remain silent." They put her in the back seat. I stood there watching the red and blue lights strobe across the trees. For the first time in days, the cabin was quiet. No music, no lies, just the sound of my land breathing again. The morning after the raid felt quieter than it should have. The lake was still, the kind of still that settles after a storm has passed, but before you've had time to clean up the wreckage. There were beer cans floating in the shallows, streamers tangled in pine branches. A stiletto heel wedged in the mud like some artifact from a war no one wanted to admit happened. I was back at the cabin early, walking through the wreckage with a trash bag in one hand and my phone in the other. I wasn't cleaning because I felt generous. I was documenting, photographing every broken light fixture, every cigarette burn, every cracked tile Karen's guests had left behind. It wasn't just about the lawsuit now, it was about burying her. I wanted the evidence neat, admissible, and humiliating. Around 10, Greg texted again. "We need to talk, face to face. I'll bring the rest." The rest turned out to be a second flash drive, a manila folder, and a printed spreadsheet with names and payment logs. He met me behind a shuttered bait shop off the main highway. Neutral ground, he said. No cameras, no HOA spies. His face looked older than it had 2 days ago. Like all the bull he'd swallowed finally caught up to him. "I kept backups," he said without preamble, handing over the materials. "Just in case." "In case she turned on you?" I asked. Greg gave a hollow laugh. "She already did." The flash drive had more than I expected. Not just faked leases and forged signatures, though there were plenty of those, but voice memos, actual recordings of Karen giving instructions on how to manipulate guests, mask payments, avoid short-term rental laws by using rotating host names. She even bragged in one memo about having a guy at the zoning board. Said he owed her favors from back in the days when his wife didn't know how flexible she was. I raised an eyebrow. "You realize this could implicate half the HOA." He nodded. "That's why I'm coming clean now. You've got leverage. I've got protection." It was subtle, but I caught the message. He didn't want money. He wanted out. Out of Karen's pocket, out of her schemes. If I was going to take her down, he wanted immunity. Preferably off the record, unofficial and untraceable. I wasn't a prosecutor, but I was more than happy to be the guy who pointed the gun while someone else pulled the trigger. "Any reason you stayed in this long?" I asked. Greg lit a cigarette. "She had dirt on me. Stuff from before. Afghanistan. I wasn't clean. She knew that. Used it to keep me close. But now, I'd rather burn with the truth than drown in her lies." He handed me a final sheet. A bank printout, a list of transfers made from Karen's LLC to offshore wallets. It wasn't just local fraud. It was federal-level stuff. Wire fraud, tax evasion, operating an unlicensed short-term rental business across multiple states using shell companies. She had gone full white-collar criminal with HOA seasoning on top. Later that day, I met with Marcy again. She didn't even sit. Just paced her office like a bloodhound on caffeine, flipping through the folder Greg gave me. "We've got her," she said. "Not just civilly. We're talking criminal charges, falsifying documents, illegal rental income, endangering property, insurance fraud, and if this stuff crosses state lines, wire fraud and RICO exposure." "RICO?" I asked. "That's mob stuff?" She grinned. Karen should have stuck to passive-aggressive newsletters. We drafted a formal criminal complaint, bundled all of Greg's materials, and sent it directly to the DA's office. Marcy said they'd take it seriously. She had contacts in the right places, especially after the last time she took down a real estate developer who built condos on marshland without permits. The woman collected fraudsters the way other people collect postcards. I didn't hear from Karen for 2 days after that. Then the texts started coming in. "Karen, unknown number. You've made your point. Can we talk?" Karen, again. This doesn't have to get ugly, Matt. Karen, 12 minutes later. I'll pay for damages. Let's settle this like adults. Karen, hours later. You're being vindictive. I was helping the community. Karen, next day. I swear Greg lied to you. He's unstable. He'll say anything. I didn't respond to a single one. I just forwarded them all to Marcy. But then she crossed a line. Karen. Would be a shame if someone brought up your background at the county meeting next week. Some people might not trust a man with your history. I stared at that one for a while. Then I called Marcy. We hit record now, right? Oh, now we go nuclear, she said. The next morning we filed a restraining order and submitted the threatening messages directly to the sheriff's office. Greg, in the meantime, had officially distanced himself from the HOA and handed over a sworn affidavit. We were building a wall around Karen, one legal brick at a time. She was running out of room to breathe. Courtrooms don't look like they do in the movies. There's less shouting, more stale air, and a lot of waiting. My hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday morning, and the courthouse smelled faintly of dust, paper, and nervous sweat. I wore a clean button-down and brought 2 flash drives, a printed binder, and Marcy, who in her charcoal gray suit looked like she'd just come from eviscerating a hedge fund CEO before breakfast. Karen showed up 20 minutes late, wearing oversized sunglasses like she was shielding herself from paparazzi that didn't exist. Her lawyer, a man with too much gel in his hair and not enough in his spine, carried a single folder, thin, unconvincing. She didn't look at me. I didn't wave. The hearing wasn't criminal, not yet. This was about civil damages, fraud, and unlawful trespassing. The criminal charges were being processed separately, but this was about setting the public record straight. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s with the patience of a schoolteacher and the deadpan delivery of a sniper, wasted no time. Marcy presented our case like a war story. Clean, efficient, brutal. She started with the property records, proving I was the sole owner of the cabin with no HOA affiliation and no authorization given for rental or public use. Then came the screenshots of the Airbnb page, the fake reviews, the forged documents. We played voice recordings. Karen's voice echoed through the courtroom, laughing about putting empty property to use and managing the optics. The judge's eyebrows inched upward. Then came Greg's affidavit, backed by his bank records, screenshots of messages, and a timeline that outlined the entire scam operation, from the creation of the fake listing to the moment she tried to pin it all on him. Karen's lawyer tried to object, but the judge waved him off like a fly. When it was their turn, Karen's defense was pathetic. She claimed she thought the cabin was abandoned, then tried to pivot, saying it was loaned to the community for wellness retreats. When asked about the payments, she claimed donations. When the judge asked about the forged rental agreement with my signature, she blamed Greg, then claimed she'd never seen the document. Marcy passed the judge the original file metadata from Karen's computer. Timestamps, edits, IP logs. It was digital blood splatter. No way out. By noon, it was over. The judge ruled in our favor, awarding full damages, court costs, and a restraining order that barred Karen from coming within 500 feet of my property. She would face a separate criminal trial for forgery and fraud. The sheriff's department had already executed a search warrant at her home. Apparently, they found 3 phones, 2 burner laptops, and printouts of other listings tied to random names, all with her fingerprints. But the real hit came online. The local news had picked up the story days ago, but after the hearing, the video clips of Karen being escorted out of court hit social media like wildfire. TikToks, Reddit threads, even a viral YouTube summary titled, "HOA Queen Turns Airbnb Scam Lord Gets Crushed by Marine Grandpa." It had over 200,000 views in under a day. HOA members scrambled to distance themselves. Karen was removed from her position by an emergency vote. They posted a formal statement apologizing for her actions and announced a full audit of internal oversight. It was the political version of rats fleeing a burning yacht. As for Karen, her personal Facebook disappeared. The Lakeview events page vanished, and a grainy photo of her mid-scream outside the courthouse ended up as the cover image for 3 separate meme accounts. She'd spent years trying to build control. Now she couldn't even control her public image. And I hadn't even begun cleanup yet. The cabin felt different now. Not just cleaner, though God knows it took 4 weekends, 2 dumpsters, and 1 professional cleaner to get the glitter out of the floorboards. But quieter. Not the absence of noise kind of quiet, but the peace that comes when a fight is finally over and you know you've won. Fall had rolled in soft and golden. The lake mirrored the amber leaves, and the air smelled like pine and wood smoke instead of cheap cologne and spilled tequila. So naturally, I decided it was time to throw a party of my own. We called it the Yon Anti-Airbnb Festival. Just neighbors, old friends, Joe with his eternal cooler of Miller Lite, Greg manning the grill like he hadn't been almost indicted 3 weeks earlier. Nate and Ramon came too, wearing matching not a militia, just hungry t-shirts. Even Deputy Collins stopped by off-duty and brought pie from his wife. The vibe, justice, smoked brisket, and sarcasm. I hung a new sign on the porch. Private property, not for rent, not for sale, not for Karen. People loved it. At one point, someone asked if I planned to rebuild the dock. I said I might, and call it the Karen Memorial Landing, where bad decisions could be symbolically drowned. That got a standing ovation. Later, as the sun dipped and the last of the ribs were gone, I found myself on the deck with Joe staring out at the lake. He elbowed me gently and nodded toward a woman in a red flannel talking to Ramon. "Not bad," he said. "You finally letting normal people onto the property again." "Only under strict vetting," I said. "No fake listings, no wine moms with clipboards." He laughed. "You think she'll ever show her face again?" I shrugged. "If she does, I hope it's on a billboard that says, 'Don't be this lady.'" He raised his beer. "To being this guy instead." I clinked bottles with him. Somewhere in the distance, a loon called out. That eerie, echoing sound that always reminded me how wild and untouchable this place used to feel. Now it felt like mine again. And just before I turned in for the night, I took one last look at the trail camera mounted by the gate. No cars, no strangers, just woods. Peace restored. But I still keep the breaker switch in my pocket, just in case.